Hello and welcome to the Rugby Paper Roundup. I am your host Ben Jaycock and I'm delighted today to be joined by TRP writer Chris Collyer. Chris has been writing for the paper over the last 2 seasons, mainly specialising in National Leagues 1, 2. Tell us about the connections you've made and interesting stories you've covered, Chris.
Nice to speak to you. Thank you. Yes. Well, since writing for yourselves, I managed to speak to a variety of lads and ladies across the National Leagues, National 1 and the Championship. First and foremost, it's really good fun. The idea came from it's a game which I've never played. Our school never really played it, so it's a chance to speak to players who do it professionally is really satisfying. But also, I like to think that speaking to these players, like sports starts in psychology. So, for instance, if a player plays well at the weekend, then I pick up the paper at the weekend and read about a chap, or I'll make contact with them through yourself. That player will will come and have a chat with me. He goes away happy because we've made to reach. I go away happy because we all get to sort of chat about the game and read about it in the paper, and maybe they'll go on and play that a little bit better at the weekend. Who knows? Really good fun. The two lads in particular who've stuck out for me recently is Connor Swan of Barnstaple, who's recently returned to National Leagues in promotion. He was really good to talk to. He was really maybe not flabbergasted, but sort of quite surprised that we'd reached out and just sort of explained the reasons why we're contacting this, that, and the other. Tell us what it's like from the ground up, from your perspective on the field. And he was very quick to compliment a couple of the guys around him for the tries that he got. Oh no, I was an assistant. So yes, of course, it's a team effort. But thank you for your time, and I'm really pleased for Barnstaple to be back in the National Leagues. And I spent a lot of time and still do talk to one Bruce Houston, who was fly half with the Cornish Pirates. Now he's gone on to play for a French team. Apologies, France. Bourg-en-Bresse, I think, which is a Brittany team. He was explaining he was born not far from where I was born, actually, in Ireland. That to become professional, he has had a chance to play with Ulster, actually. He played during COVID. He was on the first team and then came over to England to sort of build up his career again. But not that his career went anywhere, but to sort of get the different perspective as opposed to like the Irish Interpro system going through the English. But he says going to France was something that was really important to him because the French rugby system in the top 14 is just unbelievable. Plus, it's a chance to go abroad with his partner, start a new playing style. And yeah, we still speak regularly. He says that he spent the first week, I believe, without any power from the flats. So he's kind of started on the back foot, but he's still loving his rugby. He's great to chat to, and I wish him all the best. I'd like to bend his ear again when if he comes back, really. But these two lads in particular, I think they're worth keeping an eye on. Just how they present themselves for a chat, how obviously they play on the field, and yeah, I wish them all the best.
And just looking at obviously we're only a few rounds in so far, but certainly getting to that stage now where I think you look at the table and you think, okay, right, so and so are in a decent position. That's a solid head start that they've made. So and so are struggling. So I think it's probably around about kind of half a dozen rounds in. Who for you kind of sticks out in each of the 4 divisions? Would you say are really kind of serious contenders this year?
Serious contenders. Good question. Recently speaking to the director of rugby of National League North, it was Darlington MP. Going back to maybe from the ground up, is the facilities and the equipment in the stadium itself, how they're starting, strikes me as if they've got that kind of stadium to fill, then the boys are going to be really, really keen to put on the show, to do the best they can both home and away. And their record, but their record is doing quite well at the moment. Darlington, I'd say, would be ones to keep your eyes on for National 2 North. Old Albanians, they're a team I'm quite interested in because I've got relatives that live about 4.5 miles north of there. So when I'm in visiting them, it's like, can I just go and just quickly go say hello? But I haven't quite got the time yet. Obviously, Barnstaple for National 2 West. I've got a keen eye on them. The Luctonians as well are doing well. In fact, they're the closest team I live to technically. So when I do get the chance, I'd love to go down there and see them. About an hour away from here. But the surrounding area, it's quite a rural country. I've driven past the stadium once or twice, and it always looks like they welcome as many people as they can. They're a team that have a sort of strength in various different positions. Forgive me, it's been a while since I've spoken to them, but I've from what I've read and speaking to like the forwards and the backs, they're all how they play, it's hard to explain. How they play seems specific to them. Was the impression I got when I did speak to them.
Yes, no, fantastic. That's excellent insight, of course. And then kind of moving on now to the professional game, up to the very top. Your beloved Ireland announced their 40-man squads only yesterday, headlined by the return of captain Caelan Doris. He'll obviously be smarting after missing the Lions series. How excited are you by his return? I mean, he is an incredible rugby player, isn't he?
Absolutely, I'm very excited for Doris's return. What drew me to him is sort of similar to my lads, really, is how he holds himself, how he deals with the press, deals with the press, deals with us. But also, I stake a lot on the player personally and how they treat a referee. Now, I'm not on the field. I'm not having a scrum turnover. I'm not getting frustrated. So, I can understand why there'd be a bit of bit of vocals with the referee. However, Caelan Doris, as and when he does, for the infrequent times he does it, seems to hold himself cool, calm, collected. I wonder how he keeps the team on this path, because the Ireland, to me, and obviously to many, sort of have there's a system of set plays and all the moves. And as a team, as a unit, they all get on so well. And Caelan Doris just seems, to me, it just seems like you could take anyone from that team, pick it up, and they would probably have the same mannerisms as a captain as Caelan Doris. For instance, I was lucky enough to see Ireland when they came over to play Wales this year. And I understand that injured players come along as well for the support. But from where I was sat, I think I was messaging you actually, he was sat on the field. His arm was in this was before, the Leinster semi-final. And I can't remember the injury he had at the time. But he was making himself visible. He was making himself visible to the Ireland players, to us, and obviously to the opposition. He wasn't he wasn't sort of being imposing or walking around sort of the big boys in town ready. He was there, and he was there for his team. It's obviously a massive shame that he didn't make it on the Lions tour, but I don't think they could have picked a better captain with Itoje. I was really impressed with Itoje with the Lions tour. Really impressed with him as a player. Even when Ireland are playing England, there was a scene where both of them were called over in this year's Six Nations to the referee. The referee's camera here. These two giants sort of looking over. Both of them, sorry, sir, on their way. As if one had accidentally kicked the other one's caps or something, and then they just carried on with the game. But we're very pleased that Caelan Doris has made it back, and devastated for him and the result of that certain Northampton semi. But his last act on the rugby pitch, because he picked up this injury, got the ball, and I'd like to think it was a bit of rugby expertise, because he landed a perfect 50-22. But part of me likes to think, I'm injured, I don't want this ball, off you go. Right, so then he did. That was his last act, and off he went for this injury. May, I believe it was, wasn't it? He's been off for some time, hasn't he?
Yes, yeah, it was a very serious injury. Really looking forward to seeing him back in the Autumn Nation series. When you look at that 40-man squad, Andy Farrell has coached a team of selectors. How do you kind of, when you're looking at it, where would you kind of pick the bones? Looking at that team, are you pleased with it? Are there any areas that you would have gone differently? A few injuries, unfortunately, that some key players. I know we mentioned off air about Cormac Isachukwu, who's in really fine form at the minute. He was actually one of the first people I spoke to when I joined the Rugby Paper 4 years ago, and he was like an up and coming back row. Amazing talker, a really interesting guy, kind of a athletics background. But he's a phenomenal athlete. Really a shame that he's not able to take part. But when you look at the rest of the squad, what impresses you, and what maybe would have you done differently if you were Andy Farrell yourself?
Yes, of course. You're absolutely spot on with the Chuku, because every time you see him, and it's lovely to have that insight of his background, actually, of like how you've spoken to him and what he's like in the athletic side of things. It's a real shame that he can't go in. The general consensus on my end is like, why? There must obviously be a reason. I've obviously got my bias though. So putting bias aside, and you look at it, you'd imagine, looking at it now, be a case of what's tried, tested. The fans want wins. We want to build. We're always going to build. It's Andy Farrell's team, and he won't settle for anything less than what can you improve each game, which is absolutely fine. However, from the outside looking in, it would be a case of a lot of these players. I believe Bundyaki will be 36 come the World Cup in 2 years' time. and a couple of the players on the past 30, quite frankly. There is concern on that side of things for preparing for the next World Cup. It would have been nice personally to have seen a few more players, bloody like self like Hugo, Gavin Coombs as well. He can't quite seem to catch a break. Doesn't matter what he does. He just doesn't seem to make the Ireland squad. But once upon a time, the Autumn Nations was like a practice tournament, wasn't it? It would be the B teams of everyone coming together and having a good old Barney. No one really. Well, sorry, obviously there was huge investment in keenness, but there wasn't a trophy at the end of it. But now it's become, and I'm quite happy it's become a bit more than this. I'm quite happy it's become, right, let's just, flex our muscles, against whichever Southern Hemisphere teams or even each other. Although, sorry, yes, the Northern Hemisphere teams don't play each other in the Autumn Nation, sorry. But yeah, it's, as a fan, I'm very keen to see it. Of course, I want to see all my boys, all the names that got me into this love of the sport, all the newcomers. I believe Paddy McCarthy, who is Big Joe McCarthy's younger brother. Joe McCarthy misses out due to a foot injury that he picked up in Australia. And I mean, he himself was fairly new to the scene recently. And I've had the pleasure of meeting him, actually. And if he wasn't a rugby player, he'd be the kind of man. He'd be a lumberjack without the axe. He is an absolute
enormous human being. Yeah,
yeah, he's a very good man. So yeah, I'm pleased to see the players that have been selected. I believe the statistic was 34 players in total: 4 Ulster, 4 Munster, 5 Connaught, and 21 Leinster.
I've got to be honest, Chris. I am quite worried about Ireland. You touched on it there. So many of Ireland's key players are over 30, and I obviously cover the under-20s quite a bit. I cover all the World Cup and the Six Nations, and there's not much talent coming through, it seems. Looking at the results, I mean, they finished bottom of the Six Nations this year with no wins, and then I believe finished 11th in the Junior World Cup. Only winning the final playoff game against Italy. So it doesn't seem like there's a huge amount of green shoots coming through. That's got to be a bit of a concern, isn't it, for Andy Farrell and Ireland in general, that who takes over from this kind of golden generation.
Absolutely. My concern on that front would be the strength and depth side of things, is in particular the pack. In my opinion, Ireland usually struggle when it comes to the scrum. Not all the time. But if I was the head coach of another team, I would say, okay, it would be the pack that we go for and then take it from there. So when it comes to the forward side of things, yes, there does seem to be a bit of a shortage, as it were. And it wasn't that long ago that Ireland in the under 26 nations were nearly back-to-back Grand Slam winners, but that was a few years ago. I wonder if it's to do with Sam Prendergast. Now, Sam has obviously been picked. We go into that obviously later if we could. That'd be lovely. He's obviously been plucked out of the team and put into Ireland as the number 10. I do wonder if that's made a difference. So maybe few international teams, in my opinion, invest so much or have put so much pressure on the number 10. Obviously, the majority of rugby teams do. I'm not saying Ireland are different in that regard, but I kind of look at it as a fan, but also for yourselves, neutral. Ireland invest so much on this, and he is the boss. He is the key he is the playmaker. Sorry, and he's got the keys to the engine. Maybe when he was taken out of the 20 prematurely and put where he is now, I wouldn't be surprised if that's rocked the boat of the performance, because suddenly maybe their backbone, they've been removed. They've got their right hand tied behind the back now. They're trying to find a new way of playing. Who wants to play rugby? Rugby is getting more popular in Ireland, which is good. And the equivalent of the Irish national leagues, hopefully there will be these boys like I speak to over for yourselves, who want that green shirt, want that line shirt. They want to be the next Brian O'Driscoll. They want to be the next Andrew Porter. That'd be magnificent. However, I agree completely. When it comes to the World Cup coming in 2 years' time, it will be a case of so I don't want to call them all, but there won't be. He's not blooding as many new players as maybe he should. It would be nice to see these 3 or 4, stars by the names. It would be nice to see a bit more investment. However, I can imagine it must be so difficult to think, well, the fans obviously want to win, so let's give them that. But they obviously want the World Cup, and oh, hang on, here comes the Six Nations, yeah, to keep everyone happy. The World Cup's obviously such a priority, and the words quarters aren't mentioned in this house. But well, I believe Andy Farrell does have a plan. I think he's a very, very clever man. I think he's, in fact, he's got a book out, isn't he? I was listening to an interview with him recently. We obviously all trust him, but yes, it would be magnificent to see some, new, hungry young players like Sam Prendergast, for example. If there was, I've got a lot of time for Sam Prendergast, biased aside. I can think of few players at the age of 21, 22, who has put that much pressure on them so suddenly. Here's the biggest shoes in Irish rugby, Johnny Sexton, you're up. And yes, I believe that by the World Cup 2027, he will be on par / force to be reckoned with. But now is the time to blood him in. Why not blood in another few players as well? I say what have you got to lose, but there's the Six Nations.
Exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head there with trying to find that happy medium of keeping supporters happy, but also thinking ahead. And it does seem to be in rugby, and Eddie Jones used to always hammer this home, but I was never a fan of always just, it's all about the next World Cup. It's all about the next World Cup. What happens in between doesn't mean anything. Well, of course it does. Six Nations is the oldest, one of the most oldest tournaments in rugby, and it means everything to everyone that takes part. So, yeah, they mean those standalone tournaments mean a huge amount to so many people. Moving on to the URC, obviously a league you follow very regularly, supporting your beloved Leinster. Big game this weekend, derby, Leinster against Munster. Munster obviously beaten so far, 3 rounds in. Leinster obviously slipped up in South Africa with a comprehensive defeat. How excited are you for that game? Obviously, like you mentioned, Sam Prendergast is going to be in action against Jack Crowley. That's the big fly half debate in Ireland. I presume you are team Prendergast all the way.
Absolutely, yes, and it's I'll answer sort of with my bias and without my bias as well. I really enjoyed the chance to write the preview for yourselves about it because it's such a, maybe soap opera is the wrong word, but it just seems like history is about to repeat itself, and for it to be at Croke Park as well, a very, very significant place. And the history between Leinster and Munster, really 170 times have they played each other since 1877, and then in 1946 the game went pro. And Munster came out on top. They were the top dogs. In 2006 they beat Leinster in the semi-final at Lansdowne Road, and then went on in the European Cup, and then went on to win the European Cup twice before Leinster tied their shoelaces. And then in 2009, it's quite an iconic game. If you're a fan, or I'd like to think even if you're not a fan, it's worth looking at the highlights. Leinster finally got the defeat on Munster. And there were 2 specific moments that caught our eye. There was the intercept by Brian O'Driscoll, who at the time, the number 10 was Ronan O'Gara, Munster Ronan O'Gara, one of the most world-class 10s in Ireland, or the world. And now he's coaching La Rochelle, and he's a very, very, very clever man. If I wanted to start a rugby team, I'd give him a ring. But yeah, after that intercept, there was a part where Ronan O'Gara was on the ground, and Johnny Sexton let his emotions get the better of him and came over and shouted. That photo has been done the rounds quite a few times now, and it basically, the rivalry went professional, and the rivalry went to a completely different level. And since then, yes, there was, forgive me, I forgot to mention, there was a world record attendance, which had never happened at Croke Park before for rugby. It was over 82,000 before Leinster went on to win. With this one coming, it's wonderful because Leinster were away to Munster last year in the URC, Sam Prendergast at the helm, but Crowley, I believe, was being rested as per the Six Nations agreements, or he might have been injured, forgive me, I haven't got the details to hand, and Leinster got the win. So Jack Crowley is on, and is, like you say, Munster are 3 from 3, unbeaten. They're doing incredibly well this season. Even it was only a narrow win that they got the weekend gone, but Munster at Thomond Park, a very, very difficult team to beat, as Leinster. But with the Ireland setup with number 10, it seemed like, in my opinion, Andy Farrell has been watching, saw Sam Prendergast, went to Leo Cullen, he's the man, we need to be starting him, kind of holding the reins a bit. And at this time, Jack Crowley has been doing a superb job for Munster and Ireland at number 10. However, towards the end of last year, they started to put him to fullback. He wasn't 10 as much. Ross Byrne, I believe, was number 10 at the summer tour to South Africa, which ended up in a draw. In the first game, Ireland were beaten up, but then Keon Frawley got the magic drop goal to draw the series. But even at that point, I believe Crowley was on the bench. Why, I couldn't tell you. I'm not quite sure what's happened in camp. I'm not sure if it's a dip in form. I'm not sure if it's preference. But obviously, with Sam Prendergast being pushed to the forefront, he made his debut this time last year, actually, in the autumn internationals against Fiji, and has played ever since. He's played in number 10 for Leinster, and he did not bad at all in his first season. Because Leinster finally won the first trophy in 4 years. So Leinster, club-wise, I believe Sam Prendergast had a good season. He's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. And is struggling at the moment in tackles. But when I was 22, I couldn't particularly tackle a bag of fish and chips. So he's got more pressure than I ever have. He's landing all of his goals. He's from what I've seen, he's got a good camaraderie with the players. I've heard it described as an armchair ride, where he's sort of, what's going on? I'm surrounded by all these internationals. I'll just kick this, have a go. But also, biased aside, and maybe not, I think he's got a bit of a swagger. Like when you see him play and when you see him call for things, he's as if he's been playing for years, and I think you need that, particularly in Ireland, in my opinion. Maybe every fly half has it. I'm not sure. I speak to quite a few, but a lot of them are very humble. But he just walks as if he's got the keys to the Aviva. He's been there before, and I like that. Crowley has it as well, Jack Crowley, and he has on form. He's landed some super and. There was the last game of the URC season for Munster was a semi, or I believe a quarter-final away at the Sharks, and he was landing drop goals. There was the second ever penalty shootout where, even though he had enormous amounts of pressure in the Shark tank, there was a player to his left who was injured, rumoured potentially not to be injured, just trying to put him off his goals. How he handled the kicks, how he landed it, how he dealt with the situation, superb. But Prendergast, they have played on the same team. They help each other when they're both in green. Either one of them has got to be itching to settle this score, to fight for this number 10 shirt that is so important to Ireland and Leinster and Munster and Connaught and Ulster. There's so much riding on the game. Even if Andy Farrell has already chosen who's his 10 and think that's it, you could argue there's regency bias. You could argue, okay, how has he got the shirt over me? Let's sort this out. And that's why we love the sport. It's entertainment, isn't it? It's so much to look forward to on Saturday. I'm very, very excited about it.
Yes, it should be a cracker, and that's just one of the interesting subplots in the match. Leinster Munster, where does it rank, do you think, in terms of rugby's rivalries? I mean, we just had the Prem Rugby Derby weekend last weekend. Some fierce rivalries. I think Charles and I discussed last weekend. We think that the East Midlands Derby, Northampton Saints and Leicester Tigers ranks as the best in England. Where do you think Leinster and Munster, with all the history it has and contacts, with that one, and then also maybe looking at some in the Southern Hemisphere and a few in France as well? Where would you put Leinster Munster, with all your insight as well, being a Leinster fan yourself?
Certainly the biggest interpro in Ireland, I could safely say, from the history, from the players involved, the players all coming together on the Irish team. Definitely the biggest in Ireland. I'd argue one of the biggest in the world, mainly because of all these subplots and these subtexts and all the results. That's had a little fallout between them, the Sexton and O'Gara rivalry. It's been reborn again for the entertainment value. However, at the weekend, I saw the Saracens and Harlequins game. Now that is a rivalry to, dare I say, end all rivalries, like the players. Again, it's a number 10 battle, isn't it? Owen Farrell's back. Marcus Smith, I've got a lot of time for Marcus Smith. I think he's one of the most superb 10s on the planet, simply because, well, he does the job, even though they don't put him at 10 as much as they should, in my opinion. But he lands his goals, he does his job. But he's quick. He is light. Every time he gets the ball, I see few 10s who think, oh, I'll just do it myself. Gone. And I've again, entertainment, value, talents. I think that's one of the most remarkable rivalries that there is in rugby. I do lean a bit towards the Bath games and the Bath rivalries with Gloucester and all this, like all the history between themselves. And not to go back to Leinster, but each team now, Ross Byrne has gone to Gloucester, previously of Leinster, and Ross Maloney is with Bath and helping get the title. So again, that's just a little bit of sprinkling of spice on that already tasty rivalry. Internationally, though, oh goodness, well, you tell me the rivalries and how long they go back to. But at the end of it all, the camaraderie between all four of the Northern Hemisphere teams internationally. I like that the new rivalries being born. That sort of came out of nowhere per se. For instance, with respect to Wales and the demise of Wales, demise of Wales, the current form of Wales, like Wales and Italy's become even more beastly now because there's there was blood there that was never. I don't mean to sound disrespectful in the slightest. Sorry, wrong choice of words, but there's blood there now that wasn't, if that makes sense. And Italy themselves are going to be turning a few heads very soon, I predict. Southern Hemisphere wise, South Africa and New Zealand, just the absolute history. And the prowess of New Zealand, when the game was, I don't believe the game was even professional, but when New Zealand were playing in New Zealand and came up to England and were beating England, and this was like the absolute, maybe it was the grassroots level. The newspapers, I remember hearing, would print that England won because they thought it must have been a mistake to have lost that much to a team from New Zealand. And this must have been 100 years ago. I was like, no, this was New Zealand doing what New Zealand do. South Africa as well. I mean, the players on both of these teams and the rivalries between them. Few other, in fact, to my mind, few other rivalries are born in World Cup finals. They're sharing, well, not sharing. Obviously, South Africa have taken the lead, but when they both take the field, it's incredible. For instance, you've got me going now. France and South Africa, that's a rivalry that's come out of the blue because of the World Cup. I believe it was the semi-final, and in my opinion, the best game of the World Cup. It was flawless. You didn't even have to know rugby to watch that game and find it entertaining. It was a try a minute, best players and literally best players in the world going at it. Ourselves, Ireland and South Africa, we have a good run on them when it's not a World. We have a good run on them, which is bizarre. At one point, Ireland were middle of the table, a bit lower down, and now we are in a position to be top of the table. And I think for a while it took. My belief is it took a while for that opinion to settle in some of the players because if I was in their shoes, what's going on, what we're doing here. But now they have belief, they have understanding, and Andy Farrell makes a huge difference. There's phenomenal rivalries coming across the game. But when it comes to England, I'll definitely say it's the Harlequins and Saracens is possibly one of my favourites. Obviously because there's so many of the players involved. But I believe rugby began. Harlequins is one of the first teams. They have so much prowess in themselves. There's characters that have played for them in the past, how they play, Smith and the wingers, and once upon a time Joe Marler. And then of course you have Owen Farrell coming back, which is huge news. Huge news. A better captain, I don't think there is in rugby, quite frankly. In fact, when he was selected for the Lions tour, I was so pleased because obviously you've got that talent, but you've also got the entertainment. It's the son and his dad and the relationship that they still have, which is cordial. But I remember seeing, I think he made his debut not his debut, his first game for the Lions this season. He was on the bench playing a team. Forgive me, I don't have the team, but the team was pretty beastly anyway. Then they put Owen Farrell on. It's like that is a declaration of war. If you've got Owen Farrell on your bench and he's coming on that pitch, game. And it was. So I've watched him non-biased and biased for some time, obviously, because you can't help but be drawn to a player of that magnitude, and especially, we got his dad. So
yeah, fantastic. And then just to finish things off, the star signing in the URC, Rico Ioane. That's just a huge move for him. Obviously, he's an interesting one. I mean, we all remember him in the 2017 Lions series, how amazing he was on the wing. I mean, he's had some amazing moments. Remember that in 2022, that wonder try he scored at Twickenham against England. He's got a hell of a strike rate. He's full of flair, full of flamboyance, and he's a real character as well. He's not your traditional humble All Black. He's not afraid to be outspoken, and it's just bizarre how rugby works, where he was obviously kind of goading and mocking one of Leinster's greatest ever players in Johnny Sexton, and then only a matter of months later, he's lining up will be lining up in blue for Leinster. It's an incredible move. It's now back-to-back All Blacks joining Leinster, or All Black superstars. I know they've had a few in the past as well. It's just it's such a fascinating move. Off the back of Geordie Barrett's success. He was obviously amazing. It wouldn't surprise me if in a few years' time Geordie Barrett's got a statue outside the RDS, because he was just incredible. You could tell he just embraced the Irish culture. He just performed every time he played. He was just what you'd expect. It's a lot of pressure, I think, on Rico Ioane because of the subplot about his fallout with Johnny Sexton, which is obviously well documented. And then following his All Blacks teammate Geordie Barrett, who was so successful and then delivered that URC title, he'll be hoping that he plays the big games. I mean, it was kind of ridiculous that Geordie Barrett was on the bench for that Champions Cup semi-final loss against Northampton Saints. I mean, sorry to bring that up, Chris, but it's just it's unbelievable that he was kind of rested for that, and then when it just ultimately was just a little bit too little, too late. I presume he'll be playing all the crunch moments. There's yet to be known when he's going to link up with the squad, but yeah, I mean, he's obviously moved from wing to outside centre. Then he kind of flirted with going back on the wing for the All Blacks during the summer. I think he gets a lot of criticism, kind of unjustified. I think there's a lot of because of like any All Black wing he shot onto the scene, was amazing, couldn't stop scoring tries, and then all of a sudden, once he has a few games, without scoring, everyone's like, "Oh, get him out. Let's have the next cow off the rank." Where does it sit with you, that signing? Do you think it's the star signing that Leinster need to compete in the Champions Cup now? Because I presume that will be the priority to try and get back on top of Europe. It's been quite a while now since Leinster have been in the Champions Cup final and winning that trophy, regularly. Do you think he's the missing ingredient, or do you think it has potential to unravel and not go the way that he or Leinster will hope it does?
It's a really good question, actually. I haven't thought about it, because when it comes to him joining Leinster, he's played 66 times at wing and over 130 times in the centre. Both of those positions are more or less covered. I know that we could do Leinster-wise, they could do with maybe a couple more backups. But I say at the wing, although you have Tommy O'Brien and various players who are ready to step up to James Lowe. So you could argue he might just be there for utility, because they seem okay in both positions. Like centre, there is a bit of a concern because Gary Ringrose has been off for a while, picked up the injury, etc. So if it was up to me, I'd have put. There was a recent overseas signing with a French player who came to Leinster, and that helped the scrum no end. I'd have picked somebody more in the middle. Whereas Rico Ioane, like you say, all those details on him, like the swagger, the entertainment that you like in these players, he's got it. He's got the the panache. Although interestingly, the last game in the Rugby Championship, he was on the bench. So I'm wondering where his hierarchy is in the All Blacks currently, because we all know where it was previously. But I think it'll only do good for Leinster. And of course, these rock star signings. The season with Geordie Barrett was phenomenal. I made a note to come back to Geordie Barrett about that. Of course, RG Snyman, seeing all that, like RG Snyman, perfect example, like the beef. If you, in my opinion, Leinster signings maybe should lean towards more beef as opposed to the wingers, because the backs in Leinster obviously seem in my opinion, seem well stocked. But using this particular player at the moment, I wonder if it was on the cards before the World Cup. We all saw how Ireland's World Cup ended, and we all had belief that that was the one. Imagine playing that pool and then coming up against the All Blacks again in the quarterfinals and not making it through. There's many reasons for it, and I don't think we've got time for all of that. However, the aftermath of the words spoken between Rico and Johnny Sexton, which I'm not going to repeat, we're going back to rivalries, about a new rivalry being born. It was phenomenal. It was shocking. It's good for the sport and the value of entertainment, whereas the game, it's not ideal. It's not decent. I'd be even if it wasn't against Johnny Sexton and Leinster, I'd still have the opinion that come on, we all say things that we regret. So when it comes to him joining Leinster, I thought it was a joke at first because I read it on Twitter, I believe, New Zealand Times. It was early. It was like, oh, that'd be funny if that happened. No. So then I followed up and looked at some journalists that I follow, and they all confirmed it, going, yeah, I can't believe this. What, are you joking? But in particular, when Johnny Sexton himself landed his first ever role as a coach with Ireland and the Lions and was asked a question about it down in Australia, he simply replied, I purchased my Munster season ticket, put it that way. And then left it at that. He didn't even smile. So I'm wondering if he'll be sat anywhere on Saturday, how he'll feel on it. So there's obviously bad blood that has been resolved behind the scenes, or most likely has not. For instance, when Ireland played the All Blacks at last year's Autumn Nations, the All Blacks was the first game. Who led the haka? Yep, Rico did, and they went on to play exceedingly well and defeat Ireland. They were better in all areas, so that was another chance to see how Rico Ioane can perform under pressure, because I doubt anyone's holding a door open for him in Dublin. But again, going from the fans' perspective, a lot of people would be, oh, come on, really? And that was uncalled for, and he signed for Leinster. So I'm wondering if the fans will open arms and welcome him, for the sake of the team and the sake of the sport. Will there be a bit of, maybe I won't clap as hard, that kind of thing. These things, I wonder what's going through his mind, because he has the talent, the attitude, and the swagger, and he's prepared to go and play for a team of which he insulted one of their most famous players. He's probably loving it. He's probably thinking, this is exactly what I'm thriving. Pressure. This is the team for me. I can make a good name for myself and follow like Geordie Barrett did. And made a note of Geordie Barrett, as in the final game in the URC, he landed an absolute perfect set piece off the back of a maul and went on and hacked the ball down the field and scored a beautiful try under the posts in Croke. And it was just like one last, yeah, thanks for having me, Leinster. Here's a trophy. But the semi-final against Northampton is massively debated in the Irish media. But first and foremost, what everyone says is Northampton were class. They had the better at every single position. The reasons why Leinster lost, we go into it and all this. However, the Geordie Barrett on the bench and the alarm bells were ringing in the podcast that I listened to. It's like, I remember there's a line, I think it was, sorry, I forget his name. One of the podcasts I listened to was saying, oh, can you imagine if it didn't work out? Yep, we can imagine that very well. My opinion for that, though, is 2 years back in the semi-final at Croke Park against Northampton, Northampton very, very, very nearly beat Leinster. And it was lucky for a Jack Conan turnover to stop them in their tracks. That kind of comeback, they scored, I think it was 2 tries in about 10 minutes, Northampton. And Leinster went, this isn't part of our well-organised plan. What's going on here? I reckon that's why Geordie Barrett was on the bench. It's like, okay, if you're going to do one of these last-minute drives, we've got an All Black to come on. We can all be clever with hindsight, can't we? It didn't work out. Northampton, in fact, at the end of the game, Leinster had a chance to kick at the post and go into extra time. But I remember Jack Conan, who was acting captain at the time, because Caelan had just gone off. I remember looking around going, what do I do? What do I do? He made the decision to do what Leinster usually do, is truck it up the middle, fail. Going back to Sam Prendergast, if Sam Prendergast had a bit more, well, I believe he's got loads of confidence and talent, but maybe if he had more experience with the team, he'd have been snatching the ball out of the hand, saying, right, I'm putting this through the post, we're going for a breather. Northampton have got a yellow card. Let's just win in that time. Sorry you were late, Geordie Barrett. We won't do it again. But, but yeah, I think Geordie Barrett did wonders for Leinster. It was magnificent to see him playing. In fact, in the first game of the European season last year, he came in off the bench against Bristol with RG Snyman. And I think Tad Furlong came on as well. Can you imagine being the opposite to it? Oh, my life. Look at these lads that are coming on now. Just, yeah, can we call the game early? He'll only do good for Leinster because of his sheer raw talent, in my opinion. And we've seen in the past that these rock star signings do fill these holes for Leinster where they need them. Where exactly the holes are, I'm not sure, because wing and centre seem okay. But if you have a utility back with that kind of talent, then I suppose it's at the discretion of Leo Cullen, really. But I could imagine we'd be seeing him more as centre, But I hadn't really thought about his positioning. I just think he's going to be very, very good, sort of wherever they put him. It's more. I'm more curious about how he'll be received. Right, by the fans. The players will be professional, but it's the fans and the forums and all the podcasts and all this. That's piquing my curiosity.
Yes, I mean, sport is just so fickle that if he scores 5 tries in 3 games, then everything will be forgotten about, and he'll be a national hero, an
Yeah.
adopted Dubliner. But no, that's all we've got time for here today. Thanks a lot, Chris, for joining us on the latest edition of the Rugby Paper Roundup. Make sure to subscribe to the Rugby Paper, following our website. You get all our content on a digital edition for as little as 14p per day. Follow us on X at the Rugby Paper and Instagram, the same handle. But yes, thank you very much for your time. See you next week.